inflation running at more like 7 or 8% for the last, say, 40 or 50 years. So if you project using inflation rates that are more realistic, again, you get a peak in silver much closer to about $300. So I think I'm being quite reasonable. And I also say that to get to that peak, we're going to be in some kind of a mania phase. I'm not saying silver's going to steadily to $300 and it's going to stay there or it's going to keep climbing. I'm saying, ultimate crazy FOMO mania, silver could easily reach 300.
Welcome to Economy Express, your go-to destination for all things economics and finance. Whether you're an experienced investor, an inquisitive student, or just someone who wants to stay ahead in today's ever-changing economic landscape, you've come to the right place. Now, let's get into the details of our news.
Welcome to today. My name is Eric. Silver is once again in the spotlight as its market experiences a surge in interest beyond traditional uses like jewelry and coins. From powering solar panels to fueling electric cars and contributing to cutting-edge 5G technology, silver's versatility is driving its demand. Since March 2023, the silver market has been showing signs of consolidation, indicating an impending significant price move. Analysts are closely monitoring this pattern, anticipating a potential breakout. Joining us to shed light on these developments is Peter Krauth, renowned author of The Great Silver Bull and publisher of the Silver Focus newsletter. Krauth attributes the current momentum in silver prices to record highs in gold, despite subdued mainstream excitement. While speculation is high in the futures market, suggesting a possible short-term correction, the long-term outlook for silver remains bullish. The global shift towards green technologies, alongside geopolitical tensions and economic policies, is reshaping the demand dynamics for silver, particularly in industries like solar panel manufacturing and electric vehicles. Despite challenges in silver supply, including production declines in key regions like Mexico and Peru, exploration efforts are underway in areas like Australia, Europe, and Morocco. Analysts project a bullish trajectory for silver prices, with forecasts indicating a climb to over $30 in the latter half of 2024 and the potential for reaching $300 by 2030. Investors are advised to consider taking positions in silver now, as prices may escalate in the future. Strategies include purchasing physical silver or exploring silver ETFs like those offered by the Royal Canadian Mint. Despite uncertainties, silver remains an attractive investment option, given its diverse industrial applications and potential for future price appreciation. Stay tuned for further updates on this evolving market.
Yeah, I think that's going to be some sort of chaos. I think that you're going to have a big consumer of silver stand for delivery. I think these markets were not really meant for that, but this is, as I say, based on what I can tell, how a lot of the industrial users are actually getting some of their silver. This is where they're getting it. And all it takes is for one big consumer to go to the market, hold a long contract, say, okay, it's expired. Now I want my silver. And for the exchange to say, oops, sorry, we're out of silver. We're going to have to pay you out in cash. And they're going to say, no, I want the silver. I don't want the cash. And they'll say, sorry, force majeure, no more silver left. Here's the cash. And that consumer, that user's silver is going to scream, and we will hear about it.
Interesting. Does the user or consumer, is there rumblings of this? I mean, do people know about this? Have you been, you're in the industry, people talking about these rumblings?
I have not heard about it. What I have heard is, in fact, just about a month and a half ago, a large-ish silver producer has told me that they sell part of their production to China, they sell part of their production to the West, and the Chinese are coming to them and they're saying, we really, really, really want the silver. We're prepared to pay you a couple of weeks in advance, and we're actually prepared to pay you $3 over spot in order to get our silver. We absolutely want our silver. So that, to me, is the best indication of the tightness in the market. It is severely tight, but we're just not hearing about it. And this is, it's these kinds of anecdotal bits of evidence that certainly point to it.
Yeah, interesting. What an analysis. Okay, let's get back on to the outlook, because, of course, supply and demand should mean prices go up. And you've suggested Obviously, you have a bullish outlook, but you've projected potential climb to over $30 in the latter half of 2024. We're currently sitting around that 26.86. We're getting close, right? You probably were correct in there, but you've even positioned yourself maybe a scenario where silver could reach $300 US by 2030. So let's break this down. You may have been correct about the 30, but 300?
Well, 300, I mean, I know it sounds sensational, but when I got to that number, what I did was I looked at what had happened to silver prices in the past, and I compared it to other assets, important assets, hard assets typically, or stock indices, for example, large indices. And so a couple of examples are, one of the, probably your viewers understand and know the best, is the gold silver ratio. So I said, okay, if I'm going to look at where silver could go ultimately, what has it done in the past? Well, in 1980, when gold peaked and silver peaked, the ratio fell to somewhere around 14 or 15. At the time, gold was $800, silver was about $50. And the ratio, as I say, was, let's use 15. So I said, okay, if I look forward and I make my own projections, and I'm not the only one, by the way, and I detail this I provide lots of detail about this in the book, how I get to this, the fact that I'm not the only one. I believe some very, very, very smart, observers, researchers in the sector have forecasts for gold, and I went with 5,000. I think that's a realistic target. We're almost halfway there at this point, so I don't see 5,000 as the biggest stretch in this bull market. In any case, if you use a $5,000 gold target and you say 15 to 1, you're at $333 silver. So to me, not a stretch. If you use, and I think it's probably perhaps more realistic, ultimately, perhaps say we go to, and again, I'm not the only one, some very savvy, very accomplished, very well-respected analysts, it's all in the book, have reached $10,000 as a target for gold. And if you do perhaps say $10,000 and you use a more conservative gold silver ratio of say 30 instead of 15, you're still at $333 for silver. So that's the gold silver ratio. If you look at, for example, in 1980 when silver peaked, you look at the silver price versus, let's say, the average home price. So at that point, when silver peaked, it took just shy of about 1,500 ounces of silver to buy the average U.S. home. If you go with today's numbers, the average U.S. home costs about $500,000, let's say, make it even easy round numbers. If you use that same ratio, you're looking at, again, right around, I believe it was $333 silver. So by that measure, again, you're at over $300 in silver. If I look at the inflation rate, and officially we're at say 3%. If you look at where we've been for the last several decades, it's probably averaged about somewhere around 3, maybe 4. But more realistically, and everybody in their daily lives will tell you that they're not comfortable with those numbers. They don't feel that they represent what people actually have to deal with and live with. And there's a fantastic research service called Shadow Stats that calculates, in fact, inflation the way it was back in the 1980s. And they have inflation running at more like 7 or 8% for the last, say, 40 or 50 years. So if you project using inflation rates that are more realistic, again, you get a peak in silver much closer to about $300. So I think I'm being quite reasonable. And I also say that to get to that peak, we're going to be in some kind of a mania phase. I'm not saying silver's going to steadily to $300 and it's going to stay there or it's going to keep climbing. I'm saying, ultimate crazy FOMO mania, silver could easily reach 300.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've heard crazier things over here, so I could probably, I'm not going to call you out on it. I'm curious, though, when you talk a little bit about that gold-silver ratio, it seems to be very divergent. I talked to an analyst last week saying he's not sure if it'll ever go back to the place that it was. But I'm curious, are consumers or investors purchasing silver because it's easier entry to the market in terms of price than gold?
So that's one of the reasons I think that silver lags gold, but then eventually outperforms it, because so people will go to gold first or pay attention to gold first because it's It's the king of assets. It's the king of, it's certainly the king of precious metals. It has been for thousands of years. And so everyone pays attention to gold first. And as you see, people ultimately, eventually decide they absolutely need some exposure to gold. And gold, let's say we're talking about 12 months from now, gold has run up, it's 2,500, it's 2,600, let's say. They're going to look at gold and say, wow, that's rich. For me to buy an ounce of gold and to put that kind of money out, what else can I get? And silver is the natural alternative to that. And even if silver is at, say, $30 or $35 or $40, they're going to look at gold, $2,500 for an ounce, silver, $40 for an ounce, much less, it will have run up much less even at that point, still below its all-time high. Gold will have set new all-time highs. And I think that that's one of the reasons that silver will gain in appeal. You'll have investment demand really become the wild card. It will pick up dramatically, and people will shift their interest from gold to silver and really push through investment demand, push the price ultimately a lot higher.
Interesting. We talked a lot about the supply and demand crunch here. How do we prepare for it? Are there strategies that you could talk to investors about that could maybe mitigate the impacts of these constraints on the market?
So if are you talking about, say, investment demand specifically?
Exactly, yeah.
Buy it now, because it's probably only going to get more expensive. Yes, people will say, well, the premiums are high. They're actually not as high as they have been. If you look at, and I'm not saying that they're low. I'm saying that they're not as high as they've been. If you look at what happened during COVID, you could not even get your hands on silver. If you looked at what happened during the silver squeeze of late January 2021, again, you could not get your hands on silver. I mean, there are stories, I talk about that in the book, where you have these bullion dealers just never witnessed anything ever like that. And then these are people who've been in business for decades. It's sometimes a second generation. They've never lived through markets like that. Their computer systems were overwhelmed. Their phone systems were overwhelmed. And they knew it was basically retail buying because it was mostly small orders. And they were starting to tell people, I'm sorry, I can't ship this in 2 or 3 days. I'm going to have to ship it in 2 or 3 weeks. And in India, for example, to the best of my recollection, some of the premiums, this would have been during the COVID pandemic panic, went up to almost 100% over spot.
Right.
So people really, really wanted the silver and were willing to pay for it. And I'm suggesting get involved when people are not excited. You will have the benefit of having access, getting delivery under reasonable times, being able to shop with peace of mind. You'll pay, as I say, reasonable premiums, relatively reasonable. They tend to, where normal premiums historically have been, say, 12 to 15%. If you're even at somewhere around 20%, I think that's attractive today. And I think you can probably find those kinds of premiums right now. So I think get involved now, buy a little bit at least to get your feet wet, get that coin in your hand, appreciate what it feels like, what it looks like. And I think you'll be sold and start building on it. Someone pointed out, actually, a subscriber pointed out to me something interesting. And I'm not suggesting people do this, but it is an option. And that is that the Royal Canadian Mint has its own version of a silver ETF, and the silver is stored at the mint. Well, not just their product, but others as well.